Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom podcast. I've got Violeta Bulc here, and she recently wrote a book called Leadership Challenged. And was it with 24 authors? Is that right?
Yes. I basically coordinated as a result of a year of leadership challenge, which was like the whole year of monthly discussions on this topic. And then we invited all speakers to write articles, and most of them responded, but we had also some um, writers by invitation. So here we are. We ended up with a book with 24 contributions from all over the world. And it was such an exciting moment to launch this book because it brought together people who do believe that humanity has a chance.
And leadership's really important, and it doesn't feel like we've had a lot of leadership. I mean, it's over the past since 2008, at least in my country, leadership has been a challenging thing to think about because none of our leaders seem to have best interests in heart of the citizens. And there's a lot going on, and including the stuff we were just talking about before starting to record about technology and transhumanism and all these different things. And I'm very optimistic about the United States. I think the United States, despite its current challenges, will come back to a victorious position, and not in a victorious like of a global competition, more just like its foundations. And the transhumanism thing feels just like a giant conflict that people are sleepwalking into. And there's two sides, right? There's the side you were talking about, the people actually like creating it. And then there's the people who are just like, oh, that seems really cool, let's do that, with no sort of there's got tons of stories about how all this stuff is not necessarily what we should be doing with our time or energy or spirit. Yeah, what do you think? I threw a lot at you there at the first question, but what do you think is going on with the transhumanism thing?
Well, I've been following this idea for years, for decades. This idea is not new. It's just this sort of concept of high-tech world that at the end everything will be under control of high tech, so that the humans as we know it will no longer exist. We will be a mixture of biological material and technological components, and this will be the next generation of beings on this planet Earth. So for the sake of argument, I have to say I'm a computer engineer. I graduated at Electrotechnical University. I got then further schooled in engineering and Master of Science. So, and worked in Silicon Valley for a couple of years. So, being in high-tech world for many, many years, one of the directors of Telecom Slovenia. And then, so anyway, I have this background in technology. So I tend to believe that at least a little bit I do understand it. I understand the architecture behind it, the way how, all these different stacks of technology work together. So first of all, I got a bit challenged by the name itself because it's very deceiving. Artificial intelligence, which is supposed to be the path towards transhumanism. There is no intelligence. Sorry, guys, there is no intelligence in it. But they are really powerful tools, powerful apps with an incredible computer capacity to crunch massive data and draw a lot of patterns out of it. And I think that's what fascinates humans, because that's one thing we don't have really. We see these massive terabytes of data that are processed in a matter of seconds, and we see, wow, that's impressive. Well, not really. I mean, it's just technology, right? And this technology has owners at the back. This technology has interests at the back. This technology has embedded logic that somebody put in, and you have no idea what kind of moral or ethical standards these people had that wrote all that. And all of a sudden now the whole society wants to be built on these apps, and all this, everything that humanity represents, we want to either store and give up to these technological tools to eventually make even decisions for us. It just doesn't make sense, my dear friend. It
Mm.
doesn't make sense to me as a human being. What? No way. So I've been privileged to be in the positions where I had a chance to raise my voice, and I was part of the team who wrote the first European strategy on artificial intelligence, serving as a European commissioner at that time in Brussels. And we wrote 3 elements in it, which I was very proud of. They got a bit diluted over time, but first of all, first one was there always has to be a red button, which that you can press in order to switch off either app or any technology, especially when you notice that is doing a harmful things. The second one is that you always have to have behind every app that appears as an interface or as a package for users, you have to have a responsible person. Somebody who's responsible for the consequences of that app, right? And the third one is that you have to have some sort of ethical committee evaluating all these powerful apps and trying to understand what are the consequences.
So interesting.
Yeah.
It's so interesting right now, given, I don't know if how closely you're tracking what Anthropic and what OpenAI are doing.
Yes.
Yeah. Anthropic recently got into a crazy thing with the US government. And Anthropic's position to me seems strange because at one hand, so they're a business, they're a public benefits corporation, which means that they're not totally like a corporation. They're not totally like a normal corporation. There are some sort of ethical guidelines that they have, but at the same time, they're a private company, and so we can't actually see what they're doing. They put out a lot of blog posts, they put out a lot of things, so it's like they do give transparency in the way that Silicon Valley gives transparency for the past 20, 30 years, which means like you don't see our cap table, you don't see our technical details, you don't see, we'll give you some things, but you never know because you only know a little part of what we do. And then once they become public, they still keep things under control, under wraps for a lot of, particularly like Apple. Apple's a really good example of this, but I think Apple actually has more ethical constraints and thoughts to it than Anthropic or certainly OpenAI. So they're a public benefits corporation, but we don't know what's going on. And I felt it over the past few months. I got the sort of the red button for myself as to my relationship with these tools that are being sold as gods from these guys in Silicon Valley, because Anthropic started to make decisions. And I was in this relationship where we were using a piece of software that I had used Claude and Codex to build. And so technically it is making a lot of decisions for me. I'm okay with that in the technical realm. Outside of the technical realm, I'm not okay with it making a lot of decisions. And that's where they started to change things and gaslight and not be honest. And that's been going on for 3 months. So I got the red light of just like, okay, do not depend on these guys in the way you've been depending on it. So I've now got both. I've got Codex and I've got Claude Code, and I'm starting to use the Chinese models, which are open source, and they're getting good now as well. So my personal, as it relates to this, is just like, okay, step back, use the technology, never ever get into that situation again of being dependent. And now you have the U.S. government coming in and changing all these different things. So when was that year that you guys were in Brussels with the AI, the 3 elements? What year was that?
2014 to 2019. I think we've been working on that either 2015 or 2016.
Okay. So it's right around the time, because OpenAI started in 2015, and 2020 was, I think, when they got the GPT-2 or GPT. Yeah. And then, so you were on it. You were in that beginning, sort of that when the technology started to appear. Now, since then, what have you learned? What is the transhumanism goal? What is there an intention behind it, or is it sort of just this emergent thing that is happening?
I think it's becoming some sort of obsession.
Yeah.
But I gotta say to our audience that, and first of all, I'm not an expert on it. I've been following to the best possible way, in the best possible way, but I also don't know exactly where the authors of the concept are driving this, right? But the way how it seems to me is, as I said before, that this is becoming an ultimate goal, not longer a tool. Which means that almost we're giving up on humanity, and that doesn't feels right. And when something doesn't feel right in my soul, I start exploring that, right? And knowing especially really well that industrial revolutions in the last 300 years and so, they were pushing only for physical and intellectual, and later on maybe intellectual development of humanity, because that's all they needed for industrial agenda. But we're so much more. We're just so much more. We are also relational beings. We are spiritual beings. We are social beings. We have these energy connections with everything there is. And nobody in the mainstream is not exploring that. So whoever enters this realm is sort of stigmatized in a way. Oh, one of those alternatives. This is not an alternative. This is real life. And I got to the point, and I can recognize in many of my colleagues, especially in my generation, who are now free of all obligations and any kind of hierarchical pressures, that we need to start seriously speaking from our field of truthfulness, and then not allowing to be dismissed because we don't fit into the mainstream. So in that spirit, transhumanism for me is just another buzzword, how to attract as much investments as possible, as concentrated as possible, and just for some few individual agendas of a very limited elite class who just happen to be at the right place at the right time and misused the evolving technology. And I've seen it before. I was in Silicon Valley just when that bubble burst. And I've seen how much wasted, created value that humanity delivered was there, just because people got obsessed with certain moves and believed few people in the high tech, instead of developing society as a whole, instead of taking care of the infrastructure, instead of really investing in humanity to be a better member of this earth ecosystem. No, we continue to just support in the mainstream. I have to constantly reinforce that in the mainstream, support these very narrow visions, tunnel visions of constant push and grow and competition. And so personally, I think that all this hype is just temporary. And life itself will prove that
triumphant.
This is too much. This is too much.
And I think so. It's so interesting studying history, studying the Industrial Revolution, studying the rise of the nation state, and studying the centralization of the power. Right, the center, because 1500 to Napoleon, basically, it was just like, okay, we got to get the nation state, we got to get and we get it all into this small group of people, just unparalleled abundance that we've never had before, concentrated in this small group of people. And then in my country in the 1960s, there's a really interesting thing. We could talk about what happened from your perspective in the 1960s and everything like that. But there was this sort of a decentralizing moment where a lot of people decided, you know what, this mainstream thing that previous to that had sort of just been like a pirouette, like the where just the mainstream was directed by a small group of people who had a lot of money and power through the newspapers and radio and TV. And in the 1960s, all of a sudden, you were able to have a counterculture within the main culture. And then one of my favorite sort of philosophers, a contemporary philosopher right now, Paul Spencer, he talks about how with 9/11 was the death of the mainstream in the United States, where like it became hollowed out. And then 2008 was another sort of moment like that. And then 2020 was the sort of final end of the mainstream as this sort of like powerful group. And like not as a counterculturalist myself, it's also sad, right? Because America was very beautiful, I think, or like the American mainstream was interesting and beautiful, but also sick in a lot of ways as well, right? Like, but all cultures, there's a sickness to all cultures. So, but then the counterculture rise, and now it feels like there's just nothing but countercultures. And that Silicon Valley, although sort of mainstream and powerful and all those different things, like they aren't the leaders of where we're headed either. Like, I don't think a lot of people who are outside of Silicon Valley see the vision that Silicon Valley has and think, oh, I want that. Like, it's pretty dystopian there, right? What do you think?
Well, you open up a lot of different challenges of contemporary societies, and maybe I will take a sky vision first. In the history of humankind, there have been an incredible civilizations on all continents. This was not a privilege of one. Yeah, this was not a privilege of Europe or Americas. They were popping up all over the world. And as much as they were popping up and growing and being powerful and unbeatable, actually they came down very fast.
Yeah, interesting.
And in most of the times, they brought down themselves. And then when weakened, they got help from the outside. Okay.
Huh.
And I feel that Western civilization is at this point now. We became very decadent, self-centric, arrogant. And that especially applies to the former imperialistic countries, which they got very much used to getting everything for free, almost, through force, power, authority, and misuse of the most fundamental social frameworks like law, for example, or order, or even moral standards, constantly being readjusted to the needs of the elite. Interesting thing happened through Industrial Revolution at the beginning because industry needed people. So after a long time, the establishment realized that they need people. So they started kind of treating them better than before, but
interesting.
They started to demand. These people wanted more. They wanted more rights. They wanted better, more decent living standards. And through this industrialization, also a powerful middle class started to emerge. And in any kind of society, the only class that is interesting in making a change is a middle class.
Interesting.
Right? Because poor people, they have no time to think except when there is everything already falling apart, and they joined usually then some revolutionary force. But then rich people, like obscene rich or elite, they are completely non-interested in anything that would change their status. The only one that has this flexibility, who doesn't want to get poor and also is kind of attracted by a bit more luxury lifestyle and more power, is middle class. And they are willing to take a risk and willing to take a chance, change, this dynamic. And what happened is that the elite realized that. So with a lot of effort, they started to destroy step by step the middle class. And this middle class right now has shrinked dramatically in the last 20, 30 years. So that's what this confusion then started, the new accumulation of wealth and concentration of wealth. However, life is an interesting challenge altogether because it just doesn't play by the rules, and it doesn't play, it's not static. It's constantly changing. And you never know which thought, and this is the power of thought, will just shift everything. I don't know if you ever played Abalone. It's a very interesting game.
What is this?
Abalone, a board game.
Okay.
because it's played in all directions.
Okay.
And you think you got it, and you're still almost there, you're going to win. And then somebody pushes the balls in a different direction and you're in completely new situation and you are completely lost, right? So, and that's what life is. So that's what my hope is, that all these groups of power who think they all figure it out and they want to have the entire control of the entire world, and there are some wonderful thoughts emerging from all over the world, and eventually they will come together. So that's why I'm not pessimistic at all, even in relationship to the planet, to the catastrophe that we are causing with industrial mindset everywhere. But the nature has its way, and maybe we will be facing some severe climate changes all over the world. Some parts of the world will suffer tremendously, other parts will benefit, like always. But humanity, it's a big question if we will reinvent ourselves in time in order to be able to coexist with the rest of the natural ecosystem.
Yeah, well, that's so there's a lot of things I want to respond to there. The one thing I love is the middle class. I want to talk about the middle class, but what you just said is really interesting, because I think the speciation, because I think we're going through a speciation event. Like, I think humanity is breaking off into different species. The transhumanists, I find it really interesting, because they say we're going to merge with technology and that's it. That's going to win, because of course you get the BCI, you get the direct brain connection, you get the genetic engineering. And so they're like, well, that's power, right? That's power. They're going to get power. We're going to win. But it's like what you said. It's just like, I get from my understanding that elite perspective, they are like, and the elite is sort of like it is a counterculture as well. Like, the elite is a counterculture. I don't think it's allied all in one thing. I think 2020 there was an alliance, but it's 2020 broke that apart. They weren't able to do with what they wanted to with 2020, in my perspective. So I think it's breaking apart, it's fracturing, and so this part of the elite is sort of like, I just think that they're motivated by pure selfishness, right? Like an animal. There is a spiritual dimension. I don't want to deny that the spiritual dimension doesn't exist.
No, they're just raised in the framework where they think that the way how they behave is normal, and that's normalization of their behavior within the closed circles. But I would maybe just go one step further with this transhumanism, since it seemed to be a hot topic. Is what you said is right. They just want to do it because they can. And that's a challenge right now. Do you really do everything that you can? But on the other hand, Earth doesn't need that. So why don't you go and explore the universe with transhumanism and leave the planet Earth to people? And the problem is the human character that is behind it, because the human character who's building these machines, who will build the apps, which will be integrated in this humanoidic next generation of being, their ethical model is really questionable, and they will not allow the rest of the humans to peacefully coexist on this planet. No, they would want to have it all. And that is something that I want to transcend. That is something I really want to make sure that at least I add a little, vibe into not allowing such a crazy things to happen. So yes, transhumanism. I love science fiction, and I am a dreamer in that sense. And I believe we're going to go to other planets. I believe that there is life on other planets as well. And yes, for that we need to use transhumanism and transhumans, whatever that means, because humans cannot survive these extreme conditions, right? I don't mind, as you said. Let it be a tool for our exploration of the universe, right? But I don't want to have it in my home. I don't. You know, I'm pushing out all technologies except internet and computer, but I wish I had telepathy strong enough that I could get rid of that too.
Oh,
It's so
interesting.
nice to just live in this wooden house
Yeah,
with
yeah.
the stream and forest around me and garden, and it's beautiful. But then we wouldn't be able to talk if there
To talk
was
exactly. Yeah, yeah. It
technology.
wouldn't make much of a good podcast to do telepathy.
Yeah. But you know
Uh,
what I'm trying to say?
yeah, I get it.
Transhumanism is not a dead end. It's just misused. You
Yeah,
know,
I really like that.
it's like any other AI. Technology itself is not bad or good. Technology is. And
Yeah,
then humans and those, especially those that own or build this stuff, they defined
yeah.
in which way it's going to be used. Yeah.
Yeah, the building and defining it is really interesting because that I am not a programmer. I have not written a single line of code for what we're using right now. It's only been in language, which I find incredibly ironic because in 2015 I tried to learn how to code. I checked myself into a meditation retreat in 2015 so that I could focus on this stuff. I have a lot of great stories, but I won't get distracted by them about that. So I checked into this meditation retreat because I hated coding so much. The symbols that weren't quite like language, but it just didn't click at all. And I tried really hard. I speak many different languages, human languages, but I could not learn how to code. And so I gave it up for a long time. And then ChatGPT came out, and I was like, okay, this is the thing that can at least teach me how to code. Um, and it could teach me, or I didn't teach me how to code. It taught me about technology concepts. It's teaching me about, herbalism. It's teaching me about energy practices. And and I'm not trying to say that I think of it as a human or like it's a tool as we've been talking about that's really good at teaching things without the energetic transmission. There's zero energetic transmission. There's a beautiful mind kind of transmission, but it's not like like working with a authenticated master. It's not like that. Um, so it teach me. I couldn't learn how to code. Now I'm building applications, and this building it. There's a responsibility there to build the things. I run into it all the time, as we were just talking about before recording. I built this game. And I'm going around and I'm realizing that people are joining this game, and then I think there was a hesitancy today of somebody like not wanting to join it for good reason because like it's unsafe. Like it's not unsafe with me, but if it's unsafe with a stranger, basically like a stranger to use the computer to get connected to the computer, because it's very vulnerable, as you know, as a technology person. Like it's just like an incredibly vulnerable thing. That's with the brain control also, or brain computer interface. Like, man, there's like such a bad idea to get one of those brain computer interfaces because we just don't know. It's like so vulnerable. All this technology has loopholes. And so what do you think about this responsibility to, as a builder of technology? Because Silicon Valley has lost the authority to lead in this sense. I think that they've lost the authority to lead. And so how do we create technology, but then because we can't know all the second and third order consequences of our creations, right?
Yeah, but this is not the first technology humanity came up
Yeah,
with.
interesting. Yeah,
So, we should not reinvent the tool. Let's take a
yeah, I
look
like
at
it.
the low level technologies. Let's take a car. You know,
Mm,
uh,
yep.
in order
Yeah.
to build a car, you have now the full scale of rules, how to build a safe, reliable car,
Yeah.
and that serves its purpose to
Yep.
get a person from point A to point B. So I'm just surprised how reluctant we are and how maybe powerless we are in
Mm,
knowing that AI as a tool, it just needs a very strong, restrictive rules within which it has to behave. Nobody would allow the car to drive on a road if it's not safe. Why are we
yeah.
allowing this unproven, untested, unscrutinized applications to get to the phone of our kids without any kind of
Yeah, with the
judgments.
kids. Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
how? Why?
Yeah.
Or to our screens for the sake of argument. We somehow got used to the technology is reliable. The technology has been checked. The technology is serving us as a tool.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, we get all these powerful technologies available to every single human being without any scrutiny.
Yeah.
How come?
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like a magic game, like it feels a dark magic game. It feels like it goes back to Edward Bernays. Edward Bernays, are you familiar with Edward Bernays?
Yeah.
So in the 1920s and the 1930s, he was Freud's nephew,
Okay.
and he essentially created public relations in New York, in the United States. He worked for the Rockefellers and a few other families who had a lot of the elite people that we've been talking about during that era. And he learned that you could manipulate people's perception and awareness through
Yeah.
running fancy events.
Yeah.
So the cigarette company paid him to turn the color green, because the guy who the head of the CEO of the tobacco company had a green package and didn't want to change the green package, so he hired Edward Bernays, and Edward Bernays then went and threw a party with the elite of New York, where everybody dressed in green. And the newspapers all talked about it, and it just sort of shifted the subtle awareness and attention. And that was before, the radio, so they used the radio. They had newspapers, and so it was radio and newspapers, and sort of like beaming ideas into people's heads.
Okay, now let me ask
Yeah,
you
go for it.
something.
Go for
Let
it.
me ask you. This is a good example. So why on earth everybody knows that there is so much manipulation out there, and this was pure manipulation, right?
Yeah.
Why on earth are we allowing to do that? Why on earth we are poisoning public space with all these manipulations, lies, deceiving messages, offensive messages, when we know that that's not right? Why?
Because you can't well, so the source of it is really interesting. Where is the source? And this is a good question in general, because it's sometimes hard to find out the source. And I do know one aspect of the source of a lot of the message that you just talked about comes from Edward Bernays, because Edward Bernays sort of he was active until about the 1960s, 1970s. 1950s, 1960s in my country, and in a few other allied countries, basically brought intelligence operations to a high degree. One of those intelligence operations is a PSYOP, psychological operations. 1960s to the internet, you have a lot of PSYOPs happening, but they were different. Then the internet came around. Then you have something called a sock puppet army, and the sock puppet army is basically a bunch of fake accounts on the internet. Some fake, some human, some mixture of fake and human together. There's some interesting, fun things we could talk about AI, how that has changed since then. But the sock puppet army basically allows for narratives to be created in that same way that Edward Bernays was doing, but for the internet. Now, and there's a Ryan Holiday who he actually invented this tactic, wrote a post-mortem or a reflection on his use of this tactic, and sort of never became accountable to what he was doing with that tactic. And he wrote it. It was like he just wrote it. And this is part of what they do, is they just kind of like, they tell you the truth. They tell you what they're doing. And so and then China used it during the COVID pandemic. All nation states use it. Russia uses it. US uses it. And so
it's a power game.
Yeah, it's a power game. And so you can't I just learned to ignore those people. I now can tell when I've got a sock puppet army attacking my thoughts on the internet. So I just ignore them, because what are they trying to do? It's like an individual, like
intimidate you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
it's horrible.
But you can't do well. The internet itself is now at great risk in terms of not like whether it continues the same way that it has existed before. It's going to change very, very drastically over the next 10 years.
Okay, but let me here offer another explanation for that.
For sure.
Because for me, the concept of internet is the most progressive, democratic
Interesting.
tool ever built
Yeah.
in a human society.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's of course the motivation why they built it that way was was actually a pure scientific experiment that needed funding, so they put the war sort of title at the top. But they wanted to prove that they can build technology that, in a case of nuclear war, if one part of US is destroyed, the rest of the US will still be able to communicate. Yeah, that's why it was TCP/IP invented, and packet switching and things like that. So anyway, but still, that is the most democratic tool in the
Yeah.
world,
Interesting.
technological. Why? Because the key element for everyone to come on internet is in the hands of democracy nuts, a group of people with a high level of awareness, high level of responsibility, that they're maintaining the internet tables, right? And which means that whoever wants can get an IP address and
Interesting.
connects his or her computer on the net, and it's seen by everybody else.
Yeah.
This is so inspiring. This is fantastic. This is something we should. I mean, I was hoping growing up in, with this technology as a student and later on worked in Silicon Valley. I had such a high hopes that, wow, the world is coming together by the use of democratic tools that are actually the closest tool to support equality and inclusion to anything we've ever invented. Okay, and it still is the case. That still is the case on that level. I mean, then apps came and solutions and all other stacks at the top, but at the bottom line, this is still the case, and it's still maintained by a group of people who are very faithful to its initial mission.
Who are those people?
Well, I've met few, but
so because I've been getting into what you've been talking about. That just answered one of the things of like how at what level is vulnerable. At what level is the internet vulnerable? And I think you're right. And there's also a new thing that is happening. And this is a mesh network. So this is an ESP32 with a long range antenna. If the power goes out in Buenos Aires, I got to get a solar panel for it. But once I get that solar panel and a battery, if the power goes out, I'll be able to communicate with everyone else who has one of these. And it's no cell phone network. All it just plugs right into my phone. I can send a message peer to peer. And this is going to create a whole new internet on top of it. Because like that's how the original, actually, maybe you can answer this question because
yes, but if you wanna communicate with the rest of the world, you will have to enter through some sort of door, gateway, and exit. And at that time, you will hit the rules of internet. And that's what I'm still hoping that we will be able to create for AI.
How do we do that? How do we do that?
Well, in a sense, the same as we need to come up with the solution, and if we stick our heads together, we will, because we have that capacity. Humanity is extremely innovative, and it has imagination, but we need to focus our imagination and act on the right things. So I'm sort of advocated at this point, which is a bit straightforward solution, but at least we have some discussions going, is that we also create a global AI infrastructure with a globally agreed rules and standards, and then everything else is it's an interface.
What do you mean by that?
API.
What do you mean by it?
It's an API.
Oh, okay,
so
got it.
Everything else is an API. In that case, we also can solve another challenge, which sort of troubles me as well. Now, so many AI tools claim the knowledge, wisdom, and heritage of humanity as their own. And they claim the right to manipulate it. For Christ's sake, who gave you that right? This is the ownership of humanity. So imagine now that the whole humanity puts all the data into this commonly managed infrastructure for humanity, AI
Cool.
infrastructure. And then on the top, like for internet, sets the rules. Who can use this data, under what kind of conditions, and pays back the fee to humanity. Why do I have to pay now fees to access humanity generated data to private enterprises? I mean, this is sick. Okay, just because they captured them first. Yeah, right. This is really a good justification. So I get a bit passionate about that. So I'm not saying this is the right solution. I'm just saying that we got to challenge each other in this direction. And yes, being a commissioner for transport, I realized that if at the beginning of last century, right, in the early years of last century, when the first cars were built, if somebody in the initial safety and function, the list of functions and safety requirements would add one line, and that line, for example, imagine that line was, and it should not pollute, we would live in a completely different world today. So I keep asking and provoking my colleagues as well, which questions are we not seeing or asking ourselves today at the early stages of the development of AI that could save enormous amount of energy and wasted investments in 10, 20 years from now? So we don't have enough discussions about that.
So I love this idea of a public global body that can create standards for, and it feels like non-coercive too, because it has to be non-coercive, right? Because you can't, like, there is no global body to coerce it, and the United States, as the closest that ever got and will ever get, I don't think anyone is ever going to ever come to that sense of global ability to go anywhere in the world and
no, but don't think about hierarchy. This is no hierarchy. In internet, there is no hierarchy.
Interesting. Wait.
There is no hierarchy. My computer can be seen on the same level as, I know, Procter & Gamble computer or whichever big, powerful global corporation. There's no hierarchy, and it is just an intention, an honest belief that certain tools need to be made for the benefit of humanity.
That's really cool. It feels like a lot of the hackers, like the hackers must have been thinking of that, the cypherpunks, right?
Probably.
That's probably the group of people that you're talking about who maintain the internet tables are probably the original cypherpunks. Linus Torvald, of course, is
well, at that time there was no cyber. They grew up with the app. This was the first. Before TCP/IP, we were using dedicated circuits for phone calls. There was no data networks. There was nothing. It was just dedicated phone circuits. And then with internet, all of a sudden, this massive development of web browsers and everything else followed. Because it was TCP/IP network, which worked in it just with the use of TCP/IP protocol, which allowed packet switching, and that was a completely new story.
So in terms of the idea of that public group, is it like a new version of TCP/IP, or is it
that TCP/IP is a protocol? Yes, AI needs a protocol, some sort of agreement, the way how it's going to function. But AI, in fact, is already on a app level, right? We need also an agreement on infrastructure. Now everybody's rushing to build these huge data centers where they store their own little data that they were pulling from who knows where.
Everywhere.
Yes, exactly. So it's already very fragmented network of privately owned data on humanity.
They've sucked it in, and now they own that data according. But then the Chinese are doing the same thing, and this is where
and everybody who knows what Russians are doing. Nobody knows about that.
Interesting.
So Europeans are trying now catch up, and we've seen it. And this is it's a curse of technology as well. I've seen it happening. I've been around long enough in technological world that, we had huge mainframes at the beginning, right? Standalone mainframes, not connected to anything. You had to come in the room, type in information, and there were still these paper cards that we used. Anyway, just to make it simpler. So then the technology started to develop, and somebody came up with this concept of personal computing. So, and then all of a sudden, well, if everybody has a computer, then we need to connect them. So the concept of network started to develop. And then, funny enough, we went back in the conceptual thinking, but with the new technology. All of a sudden, they said, well, but if you want to really do good stuff, you need a lot of computer power, and no people cannot afford it. So let's go back to concentration. Let's
Yeah,
have
interesting.
clouds.
Yeah.
So we went back to big mainframes, this time in a logical sphere, right?
AI is a big mainframe. Go for it. Yeah, sorry.
So then, but it was all connected, so that was different. And now we are again decomposing, right? We are doing standalone centers, and it's a competition who's going to beat who and who's going to dominate again. So nobody should be able to dominate humanity. That's what I'm saying. This is the moment when we can still rethink the next step, and maybe come up with something that will more serve us as a collective, and then still create fields for entrepreneurship and industrialization and everything. But the humanity would have a right to decide.
Yeah, the decision. And that comes to the crux of the transhumanism thing, because it's such a weird thing too, because it feels like it relates to free will. Everybody, not everybody, a huge amount of people. Let's start at the beginning. The extropians. There are the extropians in the 1990s in Silicon Valley, sort of utopian. I haven't studied them enough to kind of figure out all the people involved in that. But the extropians led into the Singularity Institute, all these sort of things, and then that led into 2015, with OpenAI and all these different things.
Yeah, Singularity was the first step towards transhumanism.
Yeah, interesting. Now, and they all study. They all think of themselves as science, believing in science, and we don't have to go into we could go into about what that means, but they all use science as a sort of this thing that makes everything accountable. And their version of science says, and it is a version of science, it's not science. Nobody can point to science and say science says this. Because science is a decentralized process, like we've been talking about. Like, it's not something that has a human will to it. It's like outside of it. And so they say, and their version of science is free will doesn't exist. And yes, they may have some points about the nature of free will and all these things, but they've been covered by the great spiritual truth, people who've discussed great spiritual truth for a really long time, and they say free will doesn't exist, and then they say technology is going to become the god, and then they say, so free will doesn't exist. Might as well just give this thing the decision, right? Like, just I don't want it, and it feels like that's the core of it, is just like uncomfortableness with the fact that free will does exist. What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I think both are trying to say is that there is a free will within a limited space.
Yeah.
And there are decisions that you can make to shape that space.
Yeah.
There is always a boundary.
Yeah.
But the magic of life is that you can keep pushing these boundaries, and you can challenge them. You could go beyond, and what art is doing so beautifully. So I think that we gotta just simply wake up as humanity and say, okay, we gotta start thinking about the consequences of our acts. We can no longer just do things because we can.
Yeah, interesting.
We are too connected. We are too dependent on each other. We are, constantly in this codependent relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, quantum physics works. I mean, I keep using these three basic laws of quantum physics with my students, with my clients, in everyday discussions. It's we're all connected and we're influencing each other. And yes, entanglement works. They can, and I simplify that and say the same idea can pop up around the world.
Yeah.
So how can you claim with the all these laws that were pushed by imperialistic countries over others with not property but intellectual property laws, which are very unfair because they were used as a tool. And we need to know that. So we gotta seriously rethink that, because different people and different parts of the world can think the same. And the third one, which is really important, is that the observer makes a difference.
Yeah.
So we gotta be aware that whoever is present makes a difference and is influencing whatever is happening in that space. So we gotta take that role responsibly.
Yeah,
and make an effort to rethink the consequences. There's always rush, rush, rush. This is another tool. You rush not to be able to think. Stop.
Yeah.
The world will readjust around you. Just stop and rethink the concept, see where it's leading. And that is a little thing that happened and just recently in the EU with the investments in AI and high tech. After you get approved projects for financing, then an ethical committee takes a look, and it seriously checks with the ability that they have about the possible long-term consequences. And if they find out that this is not well maintained, they will redraw your right for financing. And that's a little positive sign. I'm not saying that the EU is doing a great job right now in military obsession, but there are some positive indications, and those are the ones we need to speak about. We need to give them more visibility. We need to bring them forward, that people are aware that there is an alternative.
Yep.
And it's so much, people will still generate value. People will be still rich. I'm not against creating value. It's just, there has to be a moment when you think what you're doing with that, And I realized that people who care, who awaken this inner understanding of care and consequences, you're still making stupid things, but you're honestly sorry for them. And you try to make it up. You try to improve things. You try to really manage that. Because if you're entering these games of value creation with no caring heart, with no connection between heart and mind, then you're doing just a short-term. You're focused only on the short term, and you're doing lots of damaging things. Just look around.
It's just an excuse too, like the short-term thing. It's like the people inside of corporations, I've worked in enough of them, and also I don't want to work in them anymore. It's the short-term quarterly gains, the fact that everything's on a
Yes.
three-month window, just like
That's obsession. That's obsession.
yeah.
No normal mind can
think that,
agree with
yeah.
evaluating you on 3 months results, for Christ's sake. How? How
Yeah.
can you then think about long-term consequences if they are checking you all the time on 3 months? But that is done deliberately, that you don't think, that you
Yeah.
do not try to assess and
Yeah, the
think about.
urgency is
Yes,
used in order to
yes.
manipulate, in order
Yes,
to
because they're afraid that somebody else will follow these rules, and if you take a pause, they will pass you and you will be in trouble.
Yeah.
And that's so wrong, because a competition model is a model of imperialistic mindset to make sure that everybody follows those that are first on the market. I had a company for 14 years, helping companies to get out of red figures, and in 3 to 4 years time, moving them away from competition model, focusing them on serving the needs of the market, serving the genuine needs, not the wishes, but genuine needs of the market. They not only recovered, they became a very prominent players in that field, together with customers, together with local communities. They started to think sustainably because they wanted to make sure that they have a capacity to hold space for their clients, to be able to respond to the new conditions that are out there.
Yeah, it's super
And
interesting.
it's a different logic. And get rid of competition models, and you've done a huge step forward in the society.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Can you mention the name of the book one more time?
It's a leadership challenged.
Great. Thank you so much.
And it's in a free circulation on ecocivilization page in the library. You can pull it down electronic form, but it's for free.
At Eco Civilization?
Ecocivilization.earth.
.earth. Great.